Thank you so much. And yes, it is a very hard act to follow, but hopefully this will be something that's more pertinent to your everyday life. No disclosure is actually pertinent to this. As previously mentioned, women are totally underrepresented in cardiology compared to other specialties. For example, in our country, if one looks at the OBGYN specialty, 71% are women. In pediatrics, 66% are women. Even general surgery, 24% of physicians are women, neurology higher, and if one looks at all disciplines, it's about 36% of all disciplines are women. And now cardiology, if one looks at practicing cardiologists, it's only about 15%. Now I understand that here in Israel, the trainees are now 20%, and I believe in the United States the trainees are 20%, but you have a lot of people who have been going through the system for decades that are pulling this number down. And so I'm going to investigate a little bit what some of the professional issues are for women in cardiology. And I'm particularly interested in interventional cardiology because that's what I do. And, you know, remember I said we're underrepresented in general cardiology, but it's even worse in interventional. And so if one looks at the proportion of female interventionalists, based on surveys, we thought it was going to be about 6%, but we wanted to get a more scientific way of addressing that. And so I'm the chairperson of the SCI, which is the Society of Cardiac Angiography and Interventions, and we have a committee called WIN, which is Women in Innovation. So we combine resources with the NCDR, that's our National Cardiovascular Data Registry, in order to determine the number and practice patterns of women in interventional cardiology. And what we did is using the NCDR database, we did a retrospective study looking at about 2.5 million PCIs done between the years of 2009 and 2013. We use the MPI number, which is the National Practitioner number, to ascertain the operator gender. And what we found is out of those 2.5 million PCIs, only about 4.5% of the interventionalists were women. So that's the data in our country, 4.5% of practicing interventionalists. And as we looked at where these women practice and where they're doing their PCIs, it appeared that only about 36% of hospitals had it. These are PCI institutions. Only about 36% of them had a female interventionalist. And 41% operated at an institution with no other female interventionalists. So they're very isolated. Nobody to bounce ideas around, nobody to look at their films. And women did appear to practice more often in academic. 57% were academic, and urban, 62% were in urban hospitals. And that's kind of a high number for the U.S. because remember, we have a very big country and everything's spread out. We have a lot of more rural and suburban hospitals. Now, 4.5% of operators are women, but we're only doing 2.8% of all PCI procedures, so a little bit lower than what we would have expected. So our conclusion from this is that our female operators are rare. Female operators practice in academic, urban settings, and we take care of more uninsured and non-white patients, and we're also often isolated from female colleagues. And so this just is another reason why we need to try to bond together and try to get our societies to create networking opportunities for us. Female operators are similar to or even more likely to tackle high-risk cases such as STEMI, cardiac arrest, or cardiogenic shock. So even though we're low volume, we're taking on higher risk patients. And if one looks at the low volume numbers, we're performing about 48 angioplasties per year. So it's not very high, perhaps compared to some of your centers here. But fortunately, PCI mortality did not differ between high and low volume female operators. So we were taking a big effort to try to encourage more women to go into interventional and to try to support the people who are already in interventional by doing similar to the ACC. We have a triple thread where we're trying to promote research, we're trying to promote networking, and get women up on the podium to speak as well. Now, shifting gears a little bit, the Europeans actually have a similar problem where there are very few women interventional cardiologists, and so they sent out surveys to try to find what was going on. They sent out nearly 50,000 surveys to anybody who expressed any interest in interventional cardiology in their database, and they got about 1,700 responses back, so not that many responses. But interestingly enough, since it was a survey about women, 61% of those responses were women, so a much higher proportion than what would be present in the natural way of things. Women, compared to men, were less frequently married, and in this survey, only about 57% of women were married. They're more frequently childless. Nearly 50% of the women who responded did not have children. And interestingly, when they ask, well, why did you choose interventional cardiology, the women are choosing it more for passion. 83% of the women are choosing it for passion, a lower percentage compared to men, and less likely for financial reasons and other ways of doing it. Then they asked the question, they tried to get at, well, why, if you did not choose interventional cardiology, why not? And on the left-hand side, what you see are some of the answers that the women responded, and on the right-hand side, it's men's opinion about women. And so it's broken down here based on the age, and so this dark bar is age less than 40. And if you are younger, you tend to be a little more interested in, I'm worried about being on call, I'm more worried about radiation, compared to the pink bars, which are the women over age 40. But the bottom line is you might have these preconceived notions about why women did not go into interventional cardiology, and the number one reason for not going into interventional was lack of opportunity. There wasn't a fellowship position available for them. And it wasn't that they were not interested. Look, at only about 15% of people chose another specialty based on preference. And so women are interested in interventional, but they do not have the opportunity to participate. And then you go over here to the men's. So these are men's explanation why women did not choose interventional. And look what they say. Lack of opportunity is really almost non-existent in their opinion. They think that women are not going into interventional because we're worried about taking call, we're worried about radiation, and we're worried about family obligations. And so yes, that is true to some extent, but exclusively only in the younger women. And where they're kind of missing the boat that women are interested in interventional, but we do not have the opportunity to go into it. And so I think that's a really eye-opening perspective. So we do have some personal life issues, and I'm not going to bring these up here because I have a talk later in the day where I'm going to talk more about personal, but clearly we have some issues with prolonged education contributing to a significant delay in parenthood. These are highly educated women have higher rates of permanent childlessness compared to other women in Western society. And if we do choose to have children, then there's opportunity loss. There's threats to our career. We might take time off. We're unable to get back on that fast track to become very, very successful. And even if we don't get off the career track, we have lost free time. We've lost income by having children. Now, the ACC every 10 years does a professional life survey, and what they found is that this just was presented at the ACC a few weeks ago, and what they found is that female cardiologists face more work-life challenges compared to men. And in this graph, we're seeing the female shown here in yellow and the men in red. And so if you look at marital status, being single, 15% of female cardiologists are single, very uncommon in men. Fewer female cardiologists have children, 72% compared to 86% of men. But interestingly enough, the number of women, female cardiologists having children is slowly increasing. So I'm glad to see that. Now we're up to only about 25% of us are childless. But if you look at some of the concerns with having children, if you do have children, who takes care of the child? And if you're a female, only 13% of the time is your husband or your spouse a primary provider of the child care, as opposed to 57% of male cardiologists. And then they ask the question, well, if when you're on call, you have to go in on weekends and nights, what happens? And so these women, 50% of all female cardiologists have to have a second child care provider. Somebody else is going to help out when they come in on call. And so you see, it is a big struggle for us. Not only is it very expensive, but it's also difficult to find people you can trust with your children. You're juggling all these roles about taking call and who's going to come in at 2 in the morning when I get called in for an emergency case, and it becomes very, very difficult to deal with this. As part of the survey, they talk about work discrimination. such as, and they gave examples, such as a lower salary or being passed up for promotion. And what they found is that 65% of women said that they experienced discrimination in 2015. And interestingly, about 23% of men also felt that they experienced discrimination. But it differed in terms of the types of discrimination. So with regard to women, women thought that sex discrimination, and these are just comparisons over the years. This is 1996, a decade later, and this is in 2015. So as you can see, over the course of 20 years, sex discrimination doesn't seem to have gone away. In fact, it's very, very common in women. And the other thing is there's even more discrimination with regard to parenting responsibilities. It wasn't very problematic in 1996, probably because women weren't having children then. But now that we're having more children, you see that we're getting more discrimination about parenting responsibilities. Now, men, on the other hand, said that they had discrimination against race primarily. So many of us do feel that we're getting discriminated against, and it's primarily related to being a woman and having children. What about levels of achievement? This is a previous survey that looked at levels of advancement among men and women, and this was just in their opinion. You compare what you've achieved compared to contemporaries who finished training at the same time, so it might have been your cardiology fellow group. And what men said is that 52% of men in academic cardiology achieve more than other people, other peers of them. And even in other practice settings, for example, in private practice in our country, they've achieved a lot more compared to other men. And the ones who said that they have achieved less is very rare in a man. Now go down here to women. Women say that only 26% of the time they've achieved more than other of their peers, so basically half of what men have said. And same thing when you get down to the private practice. So women do not feel that they're achieving as much academically or as much clinically as their peer group, and certainly not as much as what the men have achieved. Well, is that really true? Are we exaggerating this? Are we saying we're being discriminated against? Are we saying that we're not achieving much, or is there scientific data to show that? Well, I think that you'll find that there are some issues here. So let's touch briefly about gender gap in academic ranks. So there was a study that just came out in JAMA a few months ago looking at sex differences in academic rank in the U.S. medical schools. And so they took data on 90,000 U.S. medical school faculty members, of whom about 30,000 were women. And what they found is if full professor status was achieved in only 11.9% of women compared to 28.6% of men. So basically men are achieving full professorship almost 3 times more frequently than women. And what they did is they looked at a whole bunch of different variables that might determine your ability to rise to the rank of a full professor. And they adjusted the statistical adjustment for numerous factors, including the faculty age, the years since training, the specialty, because women tend to do more OBGYN and pediatrics, the number of publications, the impact factor of the journals, for the number of first and the number of last authorships. Of course, that indicates that you wrote it or you're the main investigator. The research status of the institution was taken into consideration. The number of trials, actually, that you have listed in clinicaltrials.gov, as well as NIH grant. And what they found is that female sex was an independent predictor of a low academic rank. And so it's not just the standard things that you think about for academic promotion. There's clearly something else going on in the academic realm where women are being passed over for these positions. And this is a quote from Ann Brown, who is Associate Dean for Medicine at Duke University in the United States. And, you know, in her at Duke University, about 70% of the women were at assistant professor or instructor levels. Not even an assistant professor, they're even below that at an instructor level. And that compared unfavorably to men. And what she commented is academic medicine is set up as a career for someone who has complete support at home and who has complete unfettered devotion to their career development. It rewards people with a narrow, deep focus, not those with broader multitasking orientations. Women multitask better, but men are better at focusing, and the reward structure is all about focusing. And I think that more or less sums it up. I think that we take on a lot of responsibilities. We're pulled in a lot of different directions. I think women are bright and we can accomplish a lot, but it's just different. What we do is different than what men do. And I'm really fortunate that I was able to accomplish what I did because I think I do have a bit of a focus. But, many women, our brains just work differently. And it's not that we should be unsuccessful. It's just that perhaps we need to change the ruler by which we're judging women. And then I want to go briefly over to this. I don't know if you have this problem in Israel. But in our country, women are always, it doesn't matter what profession they're in, whether it's cardiology, whether it's pediatrics, whether it's total non-medical field, women get paid less than men. And so this just came out recently that says that female cardiologists earn $100,000 less than men. Here's the study, and what they did is they it was a survey from 26, almost 3,000 cardiologists, and these are practicing cardiologists, so it's not an academic group, they're out in private practice. Now we know that already that women make less in academic institutions, so they decided to look at this private practice. And they looked at 150 different independent variables as to things that might contribute to this low salary, including this. We have this thing in our country called RVU, relative work values, and so they took that into consideration as well, and they did a lot of different modeling, lots of different types of statistical testing to make sure that they were right on this. And what they found is women were more likely to specialize in general, non-invasive cardiology, which is what we've seen, and less likely to specialize in interventional. If one looks at the RVUs in other job characteristics, the proportion of full-time women versus men was 80% versus 91%. So that was a highly significant difference, but I'm happy to say that 80% of women are working full-time. And then if you look at the women who worked half days, it was really not that different for men versus women. 422 half days for women compared to 433 for men. And the RVUs generated were actually lower for women compared to men. So of course there's some baseline differences that we're seeing here, but we're going to adjust for all those baseline differences. The RVUs are based on some sort of a model where we think how much work it goes into it. And what we found is that women, as you might expect, perform more echoes and exercise stress tests. Men were performing more hospital visits and clinic visits, as well as cardiac caths and ECGs. And then there's a similar number of other things that were performed between the two. And if you, what you see here is the unadjusted work scale here, unadjusted model. Women were getting paid $107,000 less than men. But after you adjusted this for 150 different personal, job, practice, and productivity characteristics, and this includes all the RVUs, so it's adjusted for the amount of work and the value of the work that you've done, being a woman was significantly and independently associated with a lower salary. And these are 3 different models that they use to look at that, but the models show it ranges between $37,000 and $31,000 even after adjusting for everything. And so once again, I think that this is just an example of issues that we have. And I can stand up here and tell you that I personally was paid less than a man that I worked with who was younger, who had fewer publications. He was hired for a job that had a lower status than mine, and I was never told about it. And the way I found out about it is my accountant was his accountant. My accountant was a woman. And she told me about it about 3 years after he was hired. And I went to my boss, and I was like really upset, so I had to write him a letter. I couldn't like storm in there and start yelling. So I wrote him a letter, and then he contacted me like the next day, and we talked about it. And you know what his explanation was? He said, well, he was married and his wife was pregnant, and I felt I had to give him more money than you. So this is the way men feel. And they hide it from you, some of the rationales for, why they pay. But a lot of it's, we don't value ourselves as women. We're not out there self-promoting, or we're not, driving a hard bargain to get what we deserve. And so I don't know the solution to that, but I mean, if it happens to me, and this is around the time that I was publishing the PAMI trials, I was doing some pretty cool things, and it even happened to me. So I think if it happens to me, I'm sure it's happening to a lot of you. So what are the potential solutions? I know we want to really increase female fellows in cardiologists and try to keep them in cardiology. So I clearly think one method is to shorten the training. I'm really worried that women just think it's way too long. I need to get this phase of my life over. I need to get a job. I need to start my family and move on with my life. So, there's a lot of other countries where they can start, students can start medical school immediately following high school. That's rare here in our country. I think we also can combine internal medicine and cardiology training and try to shorten that. I think to try to solicit more people, we have to go beyond cardiology, because that's too late already. We need to target internal medicine trainees. And we also need to increase the number of females in leadership positions to serve as role models, so that women can see that we're out here, and yes, we do exist, and yes, we're able to have kids and still have a life. I think once you're in cardiology, we need to understand the criteria for promotion and know who makes those promotion decisions and try to target that person. And then develop your professional CV to keep track of all of your academic accomplishments. And where do I see people going? I think we're going to get more women into cardiology as well as interventional, but we have to really focus on trying to keep women in the profession as well. In our country now, instead of the private practice, we're getting more of this thing called an employed model, where we're employed by the hospital. There's this move to pay for performance, which says based on your quality, you're going to get paid a certain amount. And I think that's really going to help women, because we're really focused on those kind of details. But we still need a lot of help. I think we need some help with flexible work schedules, recognition for the work that we do, even though it might be different than men, and finally, equal pay for equal work. Thank you.